Good morning, boys and girls. Well, today is Thursday, and it's kind of a nasty cold morning outside, so I have moved our reading back inside today. Hopefully, it'll be nice enough next week to go back outside. We are beginning chapter 13, which is early morning. And if you remember, Poppy had asked Erith if she could rest for a while because she was really tired. Within the log, but not too far from its entrance, Poppy found herself a soft place to sleep. There, curled up in a tight ball with her tail tip parked right below her nose, she felt safe enough to sleep. When she awoke after a long sound slumber, it was dark and quiet. She got up slowly and stretched her aching muscles, then looked about for some sign of Erith. The old porcupine was nowhere to be seen. Was he gone for good? Not likely, Poppy knew, but he might be gone for hours. She also knew she was hungry. Cautiously, she made her way to the log's opening. It was night, and she could not see neither sky nor stars. A silver sheen of moonlight made lace of the canopy of trees above, even while transforming the ground into a carpet of velvet gray. She sniffed the air, mingled with the sharp scent of pine and fir. She breathed in delicious hints of good things to eat: nuts, berries, seeds, fragrant flowers, tender roots. There were sounds too, the creak and groan of trees, the sudden shrill cries of animals, the occasional fuzz-buzz of passing bugs. Poppy could only feel astonishment. This was not Dimwood the forbidding. This was Dimwood the beautiful, a luxuriant world that teemed with life, a universe that held more than she had ever seen or dreamed of, a paradise that filled her with an almost aching desire to dance through it and see more. Trembling with excitement, Poppy was about to take a step away from the log when she chanced to look up. Okay, here's Poppy in the opening of the log. And when she looked up, who knows what she saw? Take the information that we had from before. On the gray, lifeless tree with a hole on its side, is that giving you a clue? An acorn toss from where she was, perched a brooding owl. The moment she saw the owl, Poppy darted back into the safety of the log. There she stayed, her heart thudding. Had the owl seen her? She did not think so. Could it, in fact, be Mr. Oakax? If it was, how could he have tracked her? Perhaps it was another owl. She had to know. In any case, her elation was gone. The forest was not to be for her. She sighed at the fright she felt. Poppy tried to calm herself. First, she pondered over her discovery that Mr. Oakax had lied about porcupines. At least she did not have to be frightened about them. In spite of herself, She giggled when she thought about Erith, such an unlikable creature. Then she thought of what else Erith had told her, that Mr. Ocax was actually afraid of porcupines. The notion that the owl was afraid of anything gave Poppy considerable pleasure. Perhaps he was afraid of other things as well. So Poppy thought again about her suspicion that there was something at Newhouse that alarmed the owl. Oh, if only there was. If only she could find it. Feeling more hopeful, Poppy returned to the log's threshold to wait for Erith. She wanted to take another look at the owl, but was afraid to. Instead, she sat, content for the moment, to gaze out at the beautiful forest. The owl Poppy had seen was indeed Mr. Ocax. He was perched upon the entrance to his home, flexing his sharp talons and staring gloomily into the forest. Now and again he swiveled his head and blinked, then clacked his beak. Hungry, he wished that something, anything, would reveal itself by moving. Once, just out of the corner of his eye, he thought something moved at the entrance of the old log that lay not far from his snag, but it was gone so fast he could not be sure. Was it the porcupine? He hoped not. He hated Erith. Just the thought of him made Mr. Ocax drop down inside his snag. Better to sit in the darkness and listen than deal with that creature. If something came by, he would hear it. When are you leaving for Newhouse? Erith asked Poppy. The old porcupine had made his way back to the hollow tree before sunup. Bits of bark were stuck about his lips, chin, and whiskers. Soon, Poppy replied evasively. Good, Erith said. You're a sweet kid, but I like my privacy. Erith, Poppy began after a moment, I know you want me to go, and I want to go too. But when I looked out before, I think I saw an owl. Oh, that snag just beyond my door? Asked Erith. The what? The old tree with a broken top. Poppy nodded. There was an owl sitting there, she said. I was told Mr. Ocax lives in Dimwood. Could that be him? Erith snorted. Follow me. Somewhat anxiously, Poppy trailed the porcupine out of the log. That the snag you're talking about? Erith said, pointing. Yes. Well then, that's where Ocax lives. Poppy jumped back. There? Absolutely. Don't you mind? Poppy whispered, edging closer to Erith. Nah, he's a jerk. Anyway, he doesn't get near me. But he rules the whole territory. Him rule? Maggot milk. But it's true. Poppy, Erith snorted. There are lots of creatures who live around here. Some are mean, like Ocax. Some are sweet, like me. Nobody rules. But he says he does. Oh, bees burp. Just because you're scared of someone doesn't mean you have to believe him. Erith turned toward the snag. Ocax, he bellowed. Ocax. No, Poppy cried, don't. It was too late. Mr. Oacax popped up in his snag hole. In a panic, Poppy scrambled to hide behind Era's tail. "What do you want?" Mr. Oacax demanded. "I got a mouse here by the name of Poppy who says you've been calling yourself ruler of Dimwood. That true?" Instead of answering, Mr. Oacax shifted his head, trying to catch a glimpse of Poppy. When he saw her timidly peeking out from behind Era's tail, he jutted his head forward, opened his eyes wide, and hissed. Erith laughed. "She also told me you claimed porcupines eat mice, that you protect them from me. Oacax, do you believe that garbage, or you just like the way it tastes in your mouth when you say it?" Suddenly, Mr. Oacax's eyes narrowed. "Where did you get that earring, girl?" he shrieked at Poppy. "That's something I ate?" Poppy became so frightened she began to back up. "What I eat is mine, girl, mine," Mr. Oacax screamed. "Listen here, Oacax," Era snapped. "This mouse has as much right as you do to go and do what she wants. I don't want you messing with her." But Mr. Oacax, ignoring Erith, only cried, "Poppy, listen to me. I don't know what you're doing here, but you might as well know the only way you'll ever get back to Gray House is when I dump your dead carcass on your father's front porch." With that, he clacked his beak, then dropped down inside his tree. Alarmed and furious, Poppy ran forward and began beating her clenched paw on Era's nose. "You lumnucks," she cried, "you lump, you rattling pincushion." The porcupine only grinned. "Why did you tell him about me?" Poppy shouted. "Did you hear what he said? He's going to kill me." "Oh, he's nothing but feathers. He doesn't bother me." "But you've got quills," Poppy protested. "Jealousy don't become you, girl." "Erith," Poppy implored, "I have to get to Newhouse. It's a matter of keeping my family alive." "You're pretty small to be a heroine." Poppy looked down at her toes. "That's not the only reason I'm going." "Oh?" "It's also because of Ragweed." "Who?" "Ragweed. He was my friend," Poppy sniffed. "See, he wanted to ask me to marry him atop Bannock Hill. Said it was the most romantic spot around. I did want to marry him, so I said I'd go, but only after asking permission of Mr. Oacax. That's the rule." But Ragweed said, "Where's the romance when you have to ask permission?" So we went without asking. When Ragweed and I got to the top, he did ask me to marry him. But before I could answer, Mr. Oacax killed him. Then later, the owl said it was because Ragweed and I went to the hill without permission that my family couldn't move to Newhouse. When they heard that, a lot of them, most of them, blamed me. Poppy pushed the tears away. "So you see, I'm going to Newhouse to prove our being on the hill had nothing to do with Mr. Oacax's refusal. If I don't prove it, my family can't go to Newhouse and will be ruined. I'll be ruined. So I have to go. Only now that you've told Mr. Oacax I'm here, he'll follow me. and keep me from finding the truth. You've got to come with me. Erith shook his head. Sorry, kid, this is your business, not mine. Anyway, I need to get some sleep. Erith turned and began to move toward the log. Erith, Poppy cried out, if you got me to Newhouse, I'd get the salt for you. Erith stopped short and spun about. A dreamy look filled his eyes. The Salt Lick? From Newhouse? The whole thing? You would, really? Poppy placed a paw over her heart. I swear. Erith grinned. Now you're talking, girl. Let's move it. Within a moment's hesitation, he began to lumber through the woods. Poppy took one look at the snag in the dawnlight, then tore after the porcupine. And you know who is watching what's happening. Let's see. The two of them had barely gone when Mr. Okex popped out of his hole. Having heard the entire conversation, he wasn't sure which way he felt more, fury or fear. But he did know he had to stop Poppy. He launched himself into the air. Chapter 14. On the way to Newhouse. The old porcupine moved faster than Poppy thought possible, body swaying from side to side, quills rattling like a snare drum. The trail Erith took was narrow but smooth, avoiding hills, tangles, and fallen trees. From time to time, Poppy saw other animals, weasels, a raccoon, a ferret, and once a bear. As soon as they caught sight of Erith, they hurried away in haste. Poppy bounded along after Erith, pausing now and again to gaze upon the endless forest with delight and amazement. In low places, white ground mist eddied gently, while above, in the high trees, the early sun sowed golden sparks among dark leaves. But once, while Poppy was staring wide-eyed at a particularly towering tree, she caught sight of what appeared to be a brown blur swooping among the pines. Her joy melted. I think Mr. Okex is following, she called to Erith. Erith, however, did no more than grunt and press forward. Poppy caught up with him and from then on stayed as close as possible. But with every third step, she glanced back. Finally, she actually saw Mr. Okex. He was high above, gliding through the treetops on wide-spread wings like a silent phantom. He is following, Poppy cried. Bug brain, Erith mumbled. Then, no matter how much Poppy searched, her neck grew strained for so much turning and twisting. She lost sight of the owl. At last she decided he had gone. More relaxed, she paused now and again to take in the forest views. It was while she stopped to sniff a Scotch broom plant that Mr. Okex, out of nowhere, made a dive at her, talons flashing. Okex, Erith bellowed without looking. Poppy leaped towards Okax for protection. The porcupine, for all his bulk, whipped about and lifted his tail, prepared to strike with his quills. Mr. Okax pulled up short and, hissing venomously, flew aloft and vanished. Here's where he made his unsuccessful dive at Poppy. Poppy, if you think there's anything that's going to keep me from that salt, you don't know me. Once more the porcupine trundled along the trail. Erith, Poppy panted, straining to keep up. I'm certain Mr. Okax wants to keep me from Newhouse. There must be something he doesn't want me to see. Erith stopped abruptly and gave a snort. Poppy, some creatures aren't worth trying to figure out. If they bother you, what I say is, swat 'em with your tail. Erith, not every tail has quills. You're right. I shouldn't hold yours against you. He set off again. Erith, Poppy said after a while, if I could just find out what it is that Okax is frightened of and tell my family. I wouldn't care what happened to me. Erith laughed sarcastically. Even if he kills you? Well, no, but Poppy, if you don't stay alive, the only thing you'll be good for is maggot mash. As they traveled further, Poppy noticed that the trees were growing less dense. There were greater varieties of flowers, too. As the brightness intensified, Poppy guessed that they were reaching the northern limits of the forest. Erith, she said, when we get out of the woods, where will we be? First, there's a dirt road and an old barn, then a field of corn. Beyond the field is some low grass, then the building where the people live. Also, there's a new big barn. That's for chickens. What are people like? Poppy asked. Other than pictures in the magazine back home, she had actually never seen any humans. They don't bother me. Do they dance a lot? What's dancing? It's gliding and swirling and dipping and sliding with someone you like. You are strange, the porcupine said. Now, don't try to distract me. On the short grass, not far from the cornfield, is the salt lick. You figured a way to get it for me yet? Erith, I haven't even seen it, Poppy answered. It's beautiful, Poppy, Erith murmured. Really beautiful. They had reached the northern edge of Dimwood Forest. Beyond the last of the trees, Poppy saw a dirt road. Even further was a dilapidated barn, smaller than Gray House and considerably older. It stood on the edge of the field, leaning over slightly. The field itself was full of tall stalks bearing plump and tasseled ears of corn. Tossed by a gentle breeze, row upon row rustled and whispered with heavy ripeness. Erith trotted across the dirt road. Come on, move it, the porcupine scolded once he looked back and saw Poppy on the other side. I'm checking for Mr. Okax, Poppy called across, though since the owl's once attempt to grab her, she had not seen him. Deciding he was either gone or hiding, she darted across the road and rejoined Erith. "Let's go," the porcupine cried and plunged into the cornfield, beating his way through the stiff stalks. Poppy paused now and again in his wake to snack on fallen corn, which lay about in great quantity. Compared with the fallow fields the mice scorched near Gray House, the profusion of food here was a marvel. Back home, the food the family had access to took long hours to find, and there wasn't that much of it. Here was food enough to feed a family twice their size. Was it this rich field that Mr. Oacax wished to hide? Did he want her family to go hungry? All the searching for food out in the open did make them more vulnerable. "There," Erith cried when they finally burst through the far side of the cornfield. "Look!" Poppy sat up. Before her was a neatly cropped grass lawn. Not far from them stood a smooth, shiny pole as high as a cornstalk. It was capped by a large block of white salt. "Isn't that something?" Erith whispered. Poppy glanced at her friend. He was drooling. Now that Poppy could see what she had promised to bring Erith, her heart sank. How in the world would she be able to do it? It was perfectly clear that even if she could manage to get the salt off the pole, it was too huge for her to carry. The problem itself was too huge to carry. With a sigh, Poppy looked further. Beyond the salt lick was a white house. It bore some resemblance to Gray House, but its paint was bright and its windows were newly curtained, signs that suggested that people were living there. Was this what Mr. Oacax didn't want them to know about? Okay, there's the salt pole and the house, new house in the background. Anybody got any ideas what Poppy's going to be able to do to get that salt off that pole? And I think she's right. Once she gets it off, she ain't going to be able to carry it. Poppy turned to the left and saw a red barn. It was considerably larger than the house, but only had a few windows. The roof was highly pitched and covered with sheet metal. At the front end of the barn, the roof jutted out to form a door hood. Poppy gasped. Sitting right below the overhang was a large, close window, was an owl. An owl twice the size of Mr. Oacax. The end of our chapter. So, what do you think Mr. Oacax didn't want Poppy to see? All the corn and all the food, the salt, that wouldn't have made any difference. How about the big owl, twice as big as he is? And if that is the case, what will happen to Mr. Oacax? Let's see tomorrow. Bye.